Alhamdulillah, salatu wassalam ala Rasulullah.
ذلك الكتاب لا ريب فيه هدى للمتقين.
Inshallah ta'ala, we're going to focus on a surah that is also commonly recited, Al-Qari'ah. What is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, talking about in these surahs? So just before we start off, we have certain words that is repeated in the first two ayahs. Al-Qari'ah, Mal-Qari'ah. So the word Qari'ah itself is from the, as the scholars say, it's from the Asma of Qiyamah. It's from the names of the Day of Judgment. You have Al-Haq, and you have many other things that refer to the Day of Judgment. So when you hear the word Al-Qari'ah, it is referring to one of the names of the Day of Judgment. It comes from the word Qara'a. Qara'a is to, it's to strike something. So that's why you have, and if you were to read the English translation of any of these surahs, you would typically find the striking hour with these. So something that is typically struck. So that's why when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes mention Al-Qari'ah, Mal Qari'ah, what is Al-Qari'ah? وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا الْقَارِعَةُ? How would you know what will make you know what Al-Qari'ah is? So these are things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is making mention of, and then He Himself mentions of the situation or the intensity of Al-Qari'ah, the Day of Judgment. يَوْمَ يَكُونُ النَّاسُ كَالْفَرَاشِ الْمَبْثُوثِ. On that day, mankind will be like, faras is moth, mabthuth, yani where they're spread around. So some of the scholars, if you read some of the books of tafsir, they will tell you this is, after they are resurrected and people are spread about the plains. So obviously, this is one of the early stages of Al-Qiyamah when they're resurrected and they're spread and they're like moths everywhere. وَتَكُونُ الْجِبَالُ كَالْعِهْنِ الْمَنْفُوشِ. And the mountains will be like wool, carded wool. Sometimes we see wool on the street with something very light, you see it flying everywhere. I.e., it won't have the same intensity that you and I we see when it's all well firm on the ground, but on that day, even the jibal will be just like wool. فَأَمَّا مَنْ ثَقُلَتْ مَوَازِينُهُ. As of for the person whose scales are heavy, فَهُوَ فِي عِيشَةٍ رَاضِيَةٍ. He shall have, the literal translation is a pleasant life. Aisha, obviously, for the ones who speak other languages, especially if you speak, let's say Urdu or something, there's a lot more meaning to it. When they live in a life of joy, or it's very, very, when they live life to the fullest, Aisha al-Radiyah, and they have something that is pleasing. There's a lot more meaning to it. But inshallah ta'ala, for this point, for this, since it's a small summary, they shall have a pleasant life in the hereafter. وَأَمَّا مَنْ خَفَّتْ مَوَازِينُهُ. As if for the one whose scales are light, فَأُمُّهُ هَاوِيَةٌ. So let's pause in this part. فَأُمُّهُ, the word itself, it means his mother is Hawiyah. That is the literal translation of it. So some of the books of tafsir, what they tell you is marji'uhu, i.e. what he's going to return back, maskanuhu, where his abode, like just like all of us, we go back to our mothers, we come from our mother's womb. This is one of the indications that his return, his abode, his place of istiqrar is Hawiyah. What is this Hawiyah? Now they explain, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks us, وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا هِيَ. What is Al-Hawi? What is Hawiyah? نَارٌ حَامِيَةٌ. Now this is a blazing fire. It is going to be extremely intense. And Hawiyah, sometimes you find in the books of tafsir, this is the place where people are going to be falling in, i.e. to the nar of Jahannam. This is going to be an intense blazing fire, as the last part mentions, نَارٌ حَامِيَةٌ. So to summarize everything in the surah itself, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about the intensity and the seriousness of the Day of Judgment, and it mentions about the scales that are going to be heavy and the scales that are going to be light. And subhanAllah, there are some linguistic, subhanAllah, anybody who looks into some of these words, the meanings are very deep. Even though we recite some of these words so many times, maybe we stick to the literal translation, but these meanings are extremely deep. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us tawfiq and action upon these things that we learn. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make the scales heavy on the Day of Judgment. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the highest of Al-Jannah. Subhanakallahumma bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Jazakumullahu khairan.